Well, we are just days, hours, moments away from the big event, the Belmont Stakes. He's Mike Beer, I'm Andy Serling, and we're going to try to give some insights into the 147th Belmont Stakes, and we'll see if American Pharoah is going to become the next Triple Crown winner.
Yeah, we still got a little time before we find out, but it's getting pretty exciting around here already. It's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens at about 7 o'clock on Saturday.
No, there's no doubt about it. There is so much anticipation. Everywhere you go in New York, they're talking about it. You see it on the news shows. Everyone's talking about it. And here is the big horse, American Pharoah, and here he is winning the Kentucky Derby. And he beat a number of horses that have been rested since this race. Mubtaahij, who's down on the rail in yellow and blue, he didn't do much running on the inside. Pimento was well back on the outside. He didn't do much running. Frosted made that run into fourth. We'll talk about these horses. Keen Ice was blocked for a considerable portion of the race, and Materiality had a much vaulted tough trip, getting left, getting shuffled out, and making a run at the end. So the question is, what's going to be different for these horses?
Yeah, well, you would hope that the horses who might have been compromised in there would get a little bit luckier on Saturday and have a cleaner trip so you can find out more about them. As far as American Pharoah goes in there, he had one of the better trips in the race. The thing with him, I think, about that race, if you're looking for positives, is that at least in there, he had to do a little bit of racing. He had to dig down deep a little bit in a race, over a mile and a quarter where he'd never been before, and he had to race a horse through the stretch, and he was able to dig down and do it. I think that's a little bit of a feather in his cap, but based on that evidence, and that's the race that you have to judge him off of right there, he's just not that much better than these horses.
No, it's not clear that he's going to be better, especially at a mile and a half. Yeah. It's the great unknown factor. Distance is the great equalizer in horse racing, and as you go through the horses in the race and you talk about the horses that are coming back, I think you have to start with Materiality. I know he's third choice in the morning line, but he's the horse that a lot of people like and could be second choice, and we'll take a look at him winning the Florida Derby in a very gutsy effort against Upstart. No, everything went wrong for him in the Derby, and they buried the field. It was a big figure win. You guys gave it a big figure. Meyer gave it a big figure. I think it was a fast pace for that racetrack. He had that tough trip, braking slowly. The door shuts on him. He shuffled back early. He shuffled back to 17th, turning for home, and he makes a run for 6th. Now, he drew the best post because he's outside of American Pharoah. And Todd Pletcher, who has 2 wins and 2 seconds in the last 7 runnings of the Belmont Stakes, he knows what it takes to win this race, but I also think he really wants to put this horse in the race because even if he's aggressive against American Pharoah and it blows up for Materiality, it'll help his other horse, Made from Lucky, who we'll talk about later.
Yeah, I think that's all true. The thing with Materiality, I mean, he's done so far through only 4 career starts what only good horses can do. And so I think you know that he's good. I think there's every reason to believe that, maybe even on Saturday, as soon as Saturday, he could be every bit as good as American Pharoah is. You want him to get a clean trip in this race, which he didn't get in the Derby. The question is he the one who has to take that role of going after American Pharoah? I have to believe American Pharoah goes to the lead in this race.
Oh, he's going.
Materiality feels like the horse who has to go with him, and those 2 horses have to race.
They do, and the question becomes, can Materiality go to the front with American Pharoah, put that one away, and then hold off any closers. And that would be a true test of any kind of champion in this race. He's a very good horse, as is American Pharoah. Yeah. Maybe they race 1-2 around the racetrack. We'll see. It'll depend how fast they go. A horse who's the second choice on the line is Frosted. And Frosted, of course, won our Wood Memorial back at Aqueduct in April. My feelings on Frosted are he's a very good horse, and as you know, I've always liked him. Yeah. But I thought he made his run in the Derby, and he had plenty of chance to catch up and at least be third, maybe make a further run after that. And to me, he flattened out a little bit in the last 8th to 16th of a mile. And I wonder if he's suited to a mile and a half. But he's the horse who may get a very good trip, though I don't think he's going to be that far back in this race.
I don't think he is either. I think he might get the right trip, though, only if the race plays out how we both talked about it before. American Pharoah goes, Materiality is the one who goes with him. That might leave Frosted in the right position in this race. I agree with you that the distance is a question for him. The distance, to me, is a question for all of them. Yes. I don't know who's getting it. It may just come down to trips. I thought he would get a good one, and I do sort of feel like, as far as his Kentucky Derby goes, I thought he had one of the subtler bad trips in that race. Not because he had any particular traffic or anything like that, but he's never been a horse who was that far off the pace before. He was carried in very badly at the start of that race, and he wound up way back in the field, further back than he's ever been before. Then he was wide, and his run did flatten out a bit, but he did have to make a run to get there, and I thought maybe that cost him. That's why I put him on top of this race.
Well, a lot of people don't like Tappett's going longer, but of course the Tappett Tonalist won this race in a mile and a half, and the breeding can be a little bit tricky. Let's talk about Mubtaahij, who's back for trainer Michael DeCock. Here he is with that impressive win, visually impressive win in the UAE Derby back at the end of March. March. The positives for him is he tried to win the Derby just 5 weeks after this race in Dubai, and now he's had another 5 weeks. So he's had another 5 weeks not only to get over the Dubai ship, but also to acclimate to being in America. He's also got one of the greatest trainers in the game, a guy who has contingencies on 3 different continents. He knows what he's doing. I hated his Derby. Maybe he didn't like being inside. Maybe you just have to say you couldn't expect him to run well 5 weeks after the race in Dubai, but he did no real running in there. But you know what? If it falls apart this race, why can't he be one of the winners?
Yeah, why can't he? I agree. Why can't he be? But I take more the position that you took in that. And maybe there are excuses to be had in some way, but boy, to me, he got one of the better trips in the Derby. Inside, clear run the entire way. He just didn't have that much. He was slow going into the Derby. I feel like he really, really, really has to improve to win the Belmont. I don't like his chances that much.
I can't disagree with you. I don't think he's impossible, but I don't have anything substantial to like. Now, we'll take a look at the Preakness, because we do need to talk about American Pharoah's performance in that race, as well as Tail of Verve and whether we think he has a chance. To me, and this is no knock on American Pharoah, he got the job done, and that's what he has to do, and that's what he keeps doing. But Dortmund, they didn't even make any effort to run with him early. That completely compromised his chances. Firing Line stumbled badly at the start, was completely taken out of the race, and then didn't handle the track. And even the third-place finisher in this race, Divining Rod, he had some trouble to start as well. So a lot of things went well for American Pharoah because they went poorly for others.
Right. Yeah, and I agree with all that. And Divining Rod, as much as I like him as a horse, he was too slow going into that race. He took a run at American Pharoah. He just wasn't good enough. The other horses just fell apart in there. And I get the thinking with American Pharoah that, the track condition comes into play in some way in that race because it rained right before. He did go fast early to make the lead, but after that, he had things well in control all the way up the backstretch, all the way through the second turn, all the way through the stretch. I think it's a different scenario on the Belmont Stakes day. And once again, the Preakness, to me, isn't a race to judge him off. The race to judge him off of is the Derby, and based on the Derby, I just don't know what his edge is on this field.
I don't disagree with that. He's the horse to beat, but he's not a 3 to 5 shot in our mind, especially making his third start in 5 weeks, trying to go the mile and a half, a hindrance that has stopped a lot of very good horses over the last 37 years. Tail of Verve, is it possible that he's one of the horses, if the race falls apart, that can win? Personally, I think there are better closers. One we haven't even talked about yet.
Yeah, I think there are much better closers than him in this race. Listen, I'm not going to take anything away from him for getting second in the Preakness at a very big price. That's all well and good for them. There are a couple races earlier on this card that he could run in that I don't think he'd be that competitive in.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough chore for him. Now, Made from Lucky is the other Todd Pletcher horse, and he won our Peter Pan, the same race that Tonalist used to prep for the Belmont Stakes before he won it. Saw Coastal do it when he beat Spectacular Bid. A much different story here because he got a very good trip in here and a fast pace to close into. And Made from Lucky has proven to be much, much slower than American Pharoah. But, Mike, if American Pharoah gets engaged early and he doesn't handle the mile and a half, do you think it's possible that this horse could be the closer that wins the race?
I think it's possible, but again, he's another horse who I feel like there are better closers to go to in this race. I think he was fine in the Peter Pan. I do think it's the best race he's ever run, but he did have a lot of things go his way, and he's just one of those horses to me, just because it's Pletcher and Castellano. There are other closers maybe at better prices in this race.
I agree with that, and I haven't even talked about my top pick, and then we'll get to your pick in this race, and that's the 7 Keen Ice, who I picked on top. Keen Ice is a horse that had a monster trip in the Derby. Now, maybe Dale Romans on his home track in Kentucky at Churchill Downs was able to get the best out of him, but if you watch that race, you've got to key in on him because he was literally blocked behind horses with a ton of run from probably the 5/16 pole to the 16th pole. He never had a fair chance in this race, and there is a real argument he would have made a serious run in the Kentucky Derby. Now, whether or not he's able to do it a mile and a half at Belmont Park, that's another story because we've seen Dale's closers do well in the Derby and not do as well here. But Dale Romans is a very dangerous man with a long shot in a big race. He has won too many of them with seemingly improbable horses to ignore it. And since I think there's a possibility of a meltdown, I've picked Keen Ice on top in this race. I picked Keen Ice over Materiality and American Pharoah. I keep leaving him out of the try. I'll put him in there. I haven't picked him yet. I haven't been right yet. but I'm not going to start picking him now, but I wish him the best of luck.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I had Keen Ice in my mix as well, and he's going to need the race to fall apart a little bit, but you're 100% right about his Derby trip. It was not a good one. I also have American Pharaoh in my try this time. I have him third, but I do feel like both Frosted and Materiality have a real chance to beat him on Saturday. I put Frosted on top because I thought he would be a better price than Materiality would be come post time,
I think you're gonna be right.
and I thought that he would get a better trip in this race, a more comfortable trip in this race. I put him over Materiality, American Pharaoh third.
Well, it's going to be a great day here at Belmont. A lot of exciting races, a lot of exciting bets to be making on that card. Those are our thoughts on the Belmont Stakes. Best of luck.